The Bible establishes that Adam and Eve are the progenitors of all humanity and that they had 3 sons, Cain, Abel, and Seth. But how then did other human beings emerge from these 5 central figures? It is worth remembering that, in Genesis, chapter 4, verse 17, the sacred scriptures relate that Cain met his wife, who conceived and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was building a city and named it Enoch, after his son. So I ask you, could this enigmatic woman that Cain married be one of the daughters of Adam and Eve? Today we will discover everything about the daughters of Adam and Eve, who they were, why they are not mentioned in the Bible, and how they contributed to the expansion of the human race. As always, I ask you to like it, subscribe to the Exciting Stories channel, and let's go to the video. The biblical narrative usually focuses on the story of Cain and Abel, 2 of the best-known sons of Adam and Eve. This tendency sometimes obscures the presence and trajectories of the other sons and daughters of this first family of humanity. Although Cain and Abel star in crucial events, such as the fateful episode of sacrifice, it is essential to shift our gaze to the less-mentioned children to obtain a more complete understanding of the descendants of Adam and Eve. The Bible, in Genesis, chapter 5, verse 4, mentions that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters besides Cain and Abel. However, details about these sons and daughters are scarce, and the narrative primarily delves into events involving Cain and Abel. This creates a gap in understanding the experiences and destinies of other family members, whose lives also played an important role in shaping the fabric of human history. By exploring these forgotten stories, we can understand the diversity of destinies and paths followed by the children of Adam and Eve. It provides a more complete view of humanity's descent and allows us to appreciate the complexity of family relationships and individual journeys. Each son and daughter, although not the focus of attention in the Bible, contributed uniquely to the expansion of the human race on earth. It is interesting how Jewish and Christian traditions, on many occasions, end up leaving aside the stories of lesser-known characters, giving more emphasis to more dramatic narratives. The absence of specific names in the Bible for these daughters contributes to their stories being marginalized, remaining anonymous, while Cain and Abel assume central roles. On the other hand, it is perfectly understandable that the Bible cannot address the lives of all the characters. It is practically impossible to see the immensity of information from the creation of the world to the end of time in a single book. In this sense, secondary books emerged, such as the Book of Jubilees, which, although not widely recognized, emerges as an alternative source that explores details about some lesser-known characters, including the daughters of Adam and Eve, so to speak. Forgotten provides a broader perspective on the first couple's extensive offspring. However, it is essential to highlight that the Book of Jubilees is considered apocryphal. That is, it is not an official part of the canon of the Jewish or Christian Bible. In simple terms, it is not considered a sacred scripture by the main religious traditions, mainly due to the lack of consensus on its authorship and origin, in addition to interpretations that differ from the most accepted versions. Still, the historical relevance of the Book of Jubilees cannot be underestimated. It offers a unique vision of the events narrated in Genesis, especially those related to the creation of the world, Adam and Eve, and other characters of the Old Testament. His nickname, Little Genesis, reflects his direct connection to the events and characters described in the Book of Genesis. This apocryphal book provides a detailed interpretation of the story, going beyond what we find in the Bible, including naming the daughters of Adam and Eve and detailing their lives. This narrative is especially valuable to some Jewish and Christian communities seeking additional information about key Old Testament events. Knowing this, when exploring the records of the Book of Jubilees in search of the names of the daughters of Adam and Eve, we come across the characters Awan and Asherah, identified as the wives of Cain and Seth, respectively. In the Book of Genesis, more precisely in chapter 4, verses 16 and 17, we find the following account. Cain withdrew from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain cohabited with his wife, who conceived and gave birth to Enoch. Later, Cain built a city and named it Enoch, naming it after his son. In some Jewish traditions, Awan, also known as Avin, is recognized as the wife of Cain, the firstborn of Adam and Eve. His name, although not recorded in the Bible, is mentioned in apocryphal texts such as the Book of Jubilees. The etymology of its name, frequently associated with Hebrew or Phoenician, suggests meanings such as vice or power. As Cain's wife, her name can symbolize the force or influence that she exerted in the lineage initiated by the firstborn of Adao and Eva. At the same time, knowledge of vice can reflect the challenges faced by Cain and Awan in the midst of the adverse circumstances that will mark their lives. Cain, after his exile, met Awan, and the biblical narrative highlights that he founded the city of Enoch, naming it after his son. The Book of Jubilees also mentions this city as one of Cain's achievements after the tragic incident involving Abel. When presented parallel to Cain, Awan emerges as an essential link in the lineage, becoming a central figure in significant events after Cain's banishment due to the murder of Abel. Although it is true that the texts of the Holy Bible do not identify Cain's wife or reveal her origin, when going through Genesis until the moment of Cain's exile and his meeting with the aforementioned woman, few characters are mentioned, among them Adam, Eva, and their children Abel and Seth. However, it is important to consider that, when Cain joined Awan, the earth was already quite inhabited. At this point in the story, there were certainly more than 5 individuals, including women besides Eve. Some suggestions indicate that Cain's wife could be his niece, the daughter of Seth. This idea is based on the long period from Cain's exile to the land of Nod until his encounter with Awan. Some theologians admit that this period lasted about 300 years. During this interval, it is estimated that the number of sons and daughters of Adam was greater than 50. In the same way, the number of sons of Seth exceeded 20. We can conclude that, in the time of Cain, Seth and the other sons of Adam and Eve, it was common for them to marry each other, even between brothers or nephews, since at that time humanity started from a single couple. When Cain considered marriage, there were several sisters and nieces available, which did not make it difficult for him to find a consanguineous wife. This practice of marriages between blood relatives persisted for some time until the human population grew and diversified. The Bible makes it clear that the entire human race descends from Adam and Eve, and any contrary theory lacks biblical foundation. In Acts 17, verse 26, it is written, "He made all peoples from one to populate the earth, having determined the previously established times and the exact places where they would live." This perspective clarifies the dynamics of relationships at the time and the formation of humanity from a single original couple. The practice of marrying a sister or niece was considered socially acceptable in this early context of humanity, when the population came from a single couple. It is essential to understand that laws prohibiting marriage between close relatives, such as those established in the Mosaic Law, were instituted long after the events involving Adam and Eve, approximately 2,500 years later. These laws were part of the covenant with Moses, establishing ethical and moral standards for the Israelite community. Only with the significant increase in the population was the prohibition of sexual relations between close relatives introduced, with the aim of preventing negative consequences such as the risk of genetic defects and health problems derived from endogamy. The other daughter of Adam and Eve, detailed in the Book of Jubilees, is Asherah, known as the wife of Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. Its symbolic association with the blue sky or lapis lazuli hints at a celestial purity in it. The name is a reflection of the uniqueness it represents in the narrative. As Seth's wife, Asherah directly influenced the continuity of the righteous lineage, contributing to the preservation of desirable virtues and values in biblical genealogy. It is worth remembering that Seth was born after the death of Abel, and Eve believed that he had been appointed by God to establish a new offspring to replace Abel, killed by Cain. According to these traditions, Asherah was initially Abel's wife, and, after his death, she was left a widow. Shortly afterward, she married Seth, and notable descendants arose from this union. Seth is a key character in biblical genealogy and plays an important role in continuing the lineage right after the tumultuous episode involving Cain. His union with Asherah led to contributions that shaped key events in the Bible. Among the sons of Seth, Enos stands out, whose name means fragile man. Enos is credited with being the first to develop the custom of invoking the name of the Lord, establishing a spiritual connection that would become a central practice in later religious traditions. In addition to Enos, Enoch, son of Seth, appears as one of the notable personalities of this lineage. Enoch is known for his exceptional closeness to God, to the point of walking with God, according to the biblical account. His life of righteousness and communion with the divine stands out as a singular contribution, representing an example of devotion that transcended his time. Due to these factors, Enoch was one of the only humans who did not experience death, was caught up to God. However, one of the most striking contributions of Seth's descendants is that of Noah, the righteous builder of the ark during the flood. Noah, son of Lamech and grandson of Seth, was chosen by God to preserve humanity and the diversity of creatures during the global cataclysm. His obedience and faith, recorded in the flood narrative, describe the importance of the lineage of Seth in the realization of divine plans for the redemption of humanity. Each individual in this lineage played a crucial role in building the human legacy and preserving faith and justice amid the challenges their generations faced. Religious tradition, especially when it explores the lineages of Cain and Abel in contrast to Seth and Asherah, offers an intriguing duality in the human condition, expressed through moral and spiritual choices. Cain, as the firstborn of Adam and Eve, follows a trajectory marked by decisions that reflect human failure. In contrast, Seth and Asherah's lineage offers a narrative of moral and spiritual choices more aligned with divine will. These two lineages, despite their marked differences, have their importance and reflect the duality inherent in the human condition, with moral and spiritual choices that shape the destiny of subsequent generations. It is important to note that the Book of Jubilees is considered apocryphal, meaning that it is not officially recognized by the main religious traditions, both Jewish and Christian. All this information about the daughters of Adam and Eve may vary according to different interpretations and religious beliefs. A curious interpretation occurs, for example, in Islam. According to Islamic tradition, both Cain and Abel each had a twin sister. As the years went by, they grew up and became each other's wives. According to the Book of the Generations of Adam, their names were Bolira and Samana. They would even be part of the discontent that generated the conflict between the brothers, since Cain was dissatisfied with his partner. These conflicts would evolve, and Cain would later kill Abel. But that is a topic for another video. Now I want to know your opinion. Did you know this story? Is it true that Adam and Eve had daughters? The information contained in the Book of Jubilees leaves many doubts. Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and click on one of the two videos that will appear on the screen to continue watching us. A hug and stay with God. But there is more to say about the daughters of Adam and Eve than we have discussed so far. According to other ancient traditions and texts, the idea that Adam and Eve had several daughters is supported by several sources. An interesting example is the Book of Adam and Eve, an apocryphal text that is not part of the biblical canon, but which offers additional details about the lives of the first couple and their descendants. This book suggests that, in addition to Seth, Abel, and Cain, Adam and Eve had many other sons and daughters whose role in human history was equally significant, although less documented. Additionally, some scholars point to oral and written traditions from Judaism and early Christianity that mention the names and stories of the daughters of Adam and Eve. For example, one rabbinic tradition mentions a daughter named Alwan, who is said to have married Cain. Another tradition mentions a daughter named Loyua, who would also have played an important role in the first generations of humanity. These daughters, although often forgotten or marginalized in mainstream narratives, are seen as important figures in understanding the entire human genealogy. Their stories and legacies, even when not included in canonical texts, offer a richer and more diverse view of humanity's origins. In addition to contributing genetically, they may also have influenced the cultural and social practices of early human communities. Finally, it is important to recognize that the absence of names and specific details about the daughters of Adam and Eve in the Bible may reflect cultural and literary norms of the time in which the texts were written. Many ancient stories, not just biblical ones, tend to focus on the exploits of men, leaving women in the background. This, however, does not diminish the importance of these figures in the history of humanity. So, as we reflect on these stories and traditions, we can appreciate the complexity and richness of early human narratives, recognizing the role of each member of Adam and Eve's family in shaping humanity. And you, what do you think of these stories? Did you know these traditions? Leave your comment and continue following us for more fascinating stories about the origins of humanity. A fascinating fact about the daughters of Adam and even the Bible is that, although most canonical texts do not explicitly mention their names or details about their lives, there are ancient traditions and writings that attribute significant roles to them. One such tradition, preserved in apocryphal texts and other religious writings, is the story of Naamah, a figure often associated as the daughter of Adam and Eve. Naamah, meaning pleasant or elegant, is mentioned in some rabbinic texts and apocryphal literature as one of the most beautiful and talented women of her time. According to these traditions, she possessed exceptional musical abilities and was known for playing instruments and singing. His music was considered so wonderful that it attracted the attention of everyone around him. One of the most intriguing stories about Naamah is that she was the wife of Noah, the builder of the ark. This version of the narrative suggests that she played a crucial role in humanity's continuity after the flood. Although this version of the story is not widely accepted in most canonical biblical traditions, it offers an interesting perspective on how the daughters of Adam and Eve could have significantly influenced later generations. Additionally, Naamah is sometimes mentioned as the mother of important figures in biblical genealogies, reinforcing the idea that, although not explicitly mentioned in the primary texts, the daughters of Adam and Eve had a lasting and vital impact on the formation of the first human communities. These stories, while apocryphal and not universally accepted, highlight the diversity and richness of the traditions that surrounded the first human families and invite us to consider the contributions and legacies of figures who would otherwise remain in the shadows of history. And you? Did you already know this story of Naamah? What do you think of the different traditions that complement the biblical narratives? Leave your comment and continue following us for more amazing stories about the origins of humanity.